Thank you again for joining us today. This webinar is sponsored by the Department on Disability and Human Development through the TAP, Institute on Disability and Human Development, and Leadership Education and Neurodevelopmental Disabilities LEND program. We're excited to have Julie Tracy from Urban Autism Solutions. So now I will turn it over to the presenter.
Thank you so much, Brenda, and thank you so much to all of our attendees today. It is a great pleasure for me to be with you today. I would like to thank the Autism Program and the Department of Disability and Human Development at UIC, along with the LEND program, for this opportunity to share information with other families and other folks who are working to try to find integrated community lives for their young adults who may have disabilities in the present day. My name, as Rhonda said, is Julie Tracy. I am the co-founder of Urban Autism Solutions, and I currently serve as the clinical director of programs for Urban Autism Solutions. I am a career speech and language pathologist and program creator, having worked for over 37 years in the space of communication sciences and disorders with adults and children who have very complex learning and disability profiles. I'm also currently the president of A+ Autism Solutions, and that is a company that we created in 2016, which is licensed to receive waiver forms from the Department of Human Services. So today, I thought I would try to talk to you all from these different perspectives and tell you a little bit about who we are and what we've created so that you too can identify for yourselves and your families what might be possible in your own lives. And I know, excuse me, I want to just let you know too, I do have the flu. So a good thing we're doing this distance learning today. We all look brilliant doing this format. I apologize if I have to stop every now and then and cough or clear my throat. I know that parents today, though, are just terrified. They're just terrified to the point of being very fearful when it comes to life after high school. And I want to try to give you a little different perspective on that today. I hope to put some of those fears aside for you. I hope to encourage you, and I hope also that we can inspire you a little bit with our story when you see what we've been able to create. So these are things that we'll try to cover today in the webinar. We're going to look back a little bit in time. We're going to tell you a little bit about our family story and how and why our programs came to exist in the form of Urban Autism Solutions. I'm going to spend just a moment talking about the research and tells us in terms of housing and employment and program needs. And then I hope to spend a little bit of time today talking with you and helping you understand the role that you want to play. It's so important. People feel a tremendous sense of urgency, but they often just don't know where to start. They're trying to balance a multitude of factors that go into housing and care plans and funding and programs. And so I'm going to encourage you today more than anything to have this honest conversation with yourself and reflect carefully on exactly what you can do and what you are willing to do to effectively make progress in creating independent young adult lives. We're going to talk about whether or not you want to be a seeker, a starter, or an advocate. And we're going to use this framework that we borrowed from the Madison House Autism Foundation to help you understand and think through some of the options for participation. We're going to talk a little bit about the best place to start, which of course is always person-centered planning, and what it is that you want for your child or family member, what you want their day to look like. I'm going to cover a little bit about options and housing models and funding and try to give you just a way to think about a sequence for making these kinds of plans. We're going to wrap up the presentation by looking at some of the programs that we designed for Urban Autism Solutions based on the needs of the young people that we were meeting and that we wanted to serve. And then I hope to have a little bit of time to wrap up and answer any questions or have a discussion with anyone who would like to add information or share information or is seeking more information. So our story, of course, starts with our family. I am the mother of two grown sons, Joe and John. Joe, my son, is 30 years old now, and he's married to his beautiful wife, Emily, and they live in Los Angeles. And John is 27 years old. John is pictured to the left of this slide. John was diagnosed with autism when he was 2, and I think like many parents my age would tell you, this is back in the day when nobody was really talking about autism. And it's with his permission that I share, excuse me, I share in part his story. I would never disclose private and personal information about what our family has been through without John's permission. But I do suspect that many people listening today have been where we were, and they may have had similar experiences. So I want you to know, more than anything, I'm a parent of a 27-year-old son with autism, and I still to this day share all of the worries and the concerns for John's future that probably everybody has, in spite of the programs that we've created. I don't know that the fear ever completely goes away, but we've tried to be as well prepared as we can. So kudos to parents who have children now in their late 20s and 30s, particularly on the autism spectrum, because I think back in the 90s, we were always the trailblazers, creating programs, fighting for insurance, creating different educational systems wherever we lived. And we still have to be those trailblazers now, because the programs and services that we want are not currently in abundance and they're not very robust. So to tell you a little bit about our family, growing up, John was a very funny and articulate and intelligent young person. But I will tell you, he struggled every single day of his life, socially and in school. He had a very hard time making it through the day in any kind of a smooth way. He was served by the Glenview Public Schools, but by high school, our lives had completely fallen apart. John's behavior became very, very erratic, and quite frankly, he was very dangerous. I was certain that I wasn't going to make it out alive. We were absolutely lost. Nobody could help us, and nobody even believed us for that matter. John endured multiple hospitalizations at terrible places, all the way from the west side of the city to Wisconsin. And there were many stories that we endured during those difficult years of his high school years, when we really didn't know where to turn. We weren't getting any answers, and we had some excellent advice that we could find in medical care, but people didn't really understand as much in 2010 and 2011 that many young people with autism have comorbid mental health challenges. I think that's something that's much more recognized now. But back in those days, people were just telling us that John's autism was getting worse, which didn't really make any sense to us. Anyway, after multiple disarming adventures, John was finally enrolled in the orthogenic school, which is an amazing residential school on the south side of Chicago. Many people haven't heard of the orthogenic school, but we think it should be a household name, so indebted are we to the amazing staff and services that he received there. I wish that we had a happy ending from the beginning of those days, but unfortunately, John declined even when he was there, and the worst was yet to come. In the summer of 2011, John endured a 6-week psychiatric hospitalization at Rush University Medical Center. It was nearly impossible to stabilize him, and if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would not believe it. The decline in his mental status at that time marked the true beginning of our work. So transformative was our suffering that we crossed a line in that late August that marked the end of one life for me and the beginning of a new one. We watched John struggle to regain his basic sanity and basic levels of cognitive function. And I knew that he was going to need a safe passage to adulthood, one that would deliver the right kind of help and supports at the right time. And in that moment, I want you to know that I knew 2 things for certain. I knew that I was going to have to figure this whole thing out, and I knew right from the start that we couldn't just help John, that any meaningful life meant that we had to create a community of opportunities for others as well. And I want you to know that the day that I realized these things, it wasn't a light bulb moment, and it wasn't music playing in the background and some kind of, happy scene in my life. It felt terrible and it felt overwhelming. And I felt just like many of you probably do today. I wasn't sure where I was going to turn for the answers or how I was going to figure that out. So those feelings are very common in parents when we're trying to decide what's going to happen next for our children. I think we have to be clear that none of us really saw these adult years coming. Maybe many of us hope that our children would need less support rather than more supports as adults. And I can say that right now in this day that we've certainly had of our successes, but none of it has been easy or straightforward. And every single day there were a million reasons to quit. And the only reason that we're still here today is that we didn't quit and we just kept going. So I want to offer that encouragement to you as well. Don't think it's going to be easy. Just because you run into some roadblocks, don't think that it's impossible, but you have to be very tenacious and very, very focused on what it is that you want. So at this time in our journey, I started to just step back a little bit and read about what was happening in our country on a national scale, and we decided to go and visit as many programs that we could, both in Illinois and around the country. We made it out to places like California. We went to Sweetwater Spectrum, and we visited with friends in Arizona that run SARC, and we looked at some of their programs. And I met with many, many providers in those days, both in the mental health world and in the developmental disability world. But I have to tell you that our search for solutions for what we were looking for turned up empty. I did come to learn, though, that I wasn't alone in my struggles, and I was tuned in to this wonderful gentleman, Dr. Paul Shattuck, who is now at the A.J. Drexel Institute for, I believe it's called Life Course Outcomes, and he's in Pennsylvania. And Paul has been doing just groundbreaking work on documenting the state of where we are with young adults with autism as they enter their post-high school years. And I came across his analysis of the National Longitudinal Transition Study, which really, really spurred me on. I came to learn basically that, as we all know, young adults with autism are going through a period of floundering, which means they experience an intense period of disconnection post-high school. They tend to be not connected to case management services. They are no longer receiving supportive services like speech and language therapy or occupational therapy. The attendance in post-secondary educational institutions is less than half. And of course, most young adults with autism are not living independently, and many have not lived apart from their parents. And when I started to look at Paul's data, which I really encourage you to do a little bit of reading, it's so straightforward, it made my thinking very, very clear. Paul also called my attention to the area of social isolation, which I think as a parent, most of you will relate to. I know that since John was a very little boy, he struggled to maintain friendships or initiate friendships. And it turns out that most adults with autism have experienced a significant amount of social isolation, and that they're never invited to an event or a friend's house, or they never go to a community-based activity. And he really documented the degree of social isolation in these first studies. So when we look kind of specifically at Illinois, I don't want to belabor the fact. I think most of us know we're not in a great position here, but we know also that in Illinois, most of our adults with disabilities are still living with a caregiver. And Illinois, of course, in terms of funding, we're now 44 instead of 47 out of 50 states. This is because the Medicaid waiver, the match is really 50-50 in Illinois, and we're not putting more money into supporting adults in community-based settings. So just from a national perspective, there's something like 80,000 people on these waiting lists for housing that can take as long as 15 years. In Illinois, the estimate is somewhere around 19,000 people. And of course, there's the problem of unemployment. Unemployment is a tricky statistic because of the way the government compiles this data. So it looks at employment in terms of people who are actually seeking work in the workforce. So the estimates right now are as high as 80%, I think, of people with disabilities and autism not being employed. And we also know that people with autism are more unemployed or struggling with employment more than individuals who have speech and language impairments or other developmental disabilities. So probably related to some of the social challenges that people with autism experience. I would just say here that, Illinois has a budget of $58 billion. And so funding services and supports for adults with developmental disabilities is just not a priority. And I really feel that the struggles that parents have are related to money. If we all had enough money, I think we can make a lot of our problems go away. But that's not the case right now, and hopefully one day that will continue to change. So we want to kind of transition into the next area, knowing that these statistics and issues and all the uphill battles that we're facing, you have to ask yourself when you're trying to support your family member or your young adult, what kind of a role are you going to play? Are you a starter of programs or are you a seeker? And the way we define these as a seeker and advocate is caregiver or a family member who's probably going to be looking for housing or social services for somebody else, but these services may already exist. For example, you might go to an agency like Urban Autism Solutions or another type of a provider. A starter, on the other hand, is somebody who is interested in maybe being a provider of services or creating something that does not currently exist, most likely not just for their own young adult, but for other people in the community as well. So we're going to talk more about being a starter in a moment, but I wanted to put some ideas in front of you about what does it mean to be a seeker. So many of you are going to be looking for services and going to agencies and trying to find supports that are going to be meaningful for your family member. So if you're going to be a seeker and you know in your heart of hearts that you don't really maybe have some of the things that we're going to talk about to start a program, you're going to have to do a lot of legwork. It's going to require visiting different types of programs, go to different agencies, both public and private, see what types of services are being offered, see what resonates with you as a family member in terms of what you're looking for. And you should also spend some time talking to other family members in these programs and talking to participants, because we spent a lot of time doing this and it was very informative. There is not a one-size-fits-all for anybody. And in most programs that I visited, there were some takeaways that I really, really appreciated as we were creating our own programs, and then other things that we didn't think would work as well for us. So if you're going to go about being a seeker and you really don't see quite what you like in an agency, but you think you might be working with an agency, here are some ways that you can help that agency. Parents, we know, are not particularly interested in doing a lot of fundraising, and we know that people don't like to hear that they have to volunteer and do this kind of supportive work, but really, because the funding crisis is so significant, you're going to have to help. And I want to deliver that message as forcefully but as gently as I can. There's a lot of ways that you can help a program. If you're helping a housing program, for example, maybe you could go to the grocery store once a week, or you could go in and offer to help with laundry. Maybe once in a while you could offer to make dinner or lunch for the whole group. If you're taking your son or daughter somewhere, you can invite somebody else to go with you. all of us are connected to many, many different individuals and professionals in society. It's necessary to agencies that you open up these connections. Maybe you know a mechanic or a plumber or somebody who can provide a needed service in a home where your child is living or a program where they're participating. If you're financially able, maybe you can make donations to help offset costs or cover some of these costs. We put a few other things on here. You can throw a birthday party or just open up your social network and invite people along to things that you're going to. Maybe there's a weekend outing that's important for your child and you could bring others with you and or offer to supervise something that is already taking place. What I do recommend, though, is if you are a seeker and you're going to be working with agencies, add your name now to a waiting list if your child is still in high school or younger. It is never too early to start this process. So you should be visiting different agencies and different programs as much as you possibly can and see what resonates with you and your family. So we're going to talk next about what it means to be a starter. And as we looked around the country and we had the good fortune of talking to many different providers, without even thinking, I believe at this point I became a starter. And this role comes naturally to me for several reasons. Number one, I have a clinical background and I felt that I knew exactly what I wanted to see from my son in terms of housing, that we'd be supportive of his mental health needs and his social needs and his autism diagnosis. So number one, I did bring some expertise to the table. Number two, I had the time. At the time that this was going on, I was a speech pathologist in a private practice. I had my own practice so that I could schedule appointments and visits and fit things in around my clients so I could make this work. I also had the tremendous luxury of knowing that my son was safe in a residential program that I loved and respected. And I knew that the best people were taking care of him and looking after him. And so I did not have that worry day by day. And I know that's a tremendous luxury that other people don't have. So the downside of having your child in a residential program, of course, is that they don't live with you and you miss them every day. But this was an upside. It did give me a little bit of time to do some legwork. The other, I think, significant factor that helped us is that we did have some money. Our family was fortunate enough to have some ability to consider financial options that would supplement some of these government support. So I know that during these days, I also had this kind of single-minded purpose to accomplish this goal. And it's not like I had a big cheering team behind me. I had a lot of people questioning me every day, asking me why I was going to do this. What was I thinking? Didn't I want to rethink this? It wasn't too late to back out. Really not a lot of encouragement. Most people actually try to discourage me from getting something started. I also, in these days, worked with other families who thought that they wanted to be starters, but it turned out they ended up dropping out. And this does happen with a lot of parent groups. I think parents are really well-intentioned when they see the amount of work that's going to be required, and it becomes very intimidating. So what I'd like to recommend to you at this juncture is that you really examine these factors in the beginning so that you can expend your energy and your resources to support your family member in the way that makes sense for you. Not everybody is going to be a starter. And if that makes sense for you, great. We're going to be talking more about that. But if not, put your energy and time into supporting programs that are already existing. So obviously for starters, and for all of us, what does the ideal outcome look like? And parents come to me all the time and they say, well, we don't even know where to start. And I always tell them, start with the end in mind. What is it that you want the day to look like for your young adult child? What does Monday look like? What does Tuesday look like? What kind of opportunities do you want to see filling up those time slots? That is exactly where you need to start. Now, the Department of Human Services has given us this person-centered planning sort of tool that's managed by the case management agencies now, but the domains that are listed on this slide are the ones that we refer to and we use when we're building goals for our residents. So we want to know what is important in their home environment. Obviously, not everybody wants to live in the same kind of a place. Some people might want to live in a group home with other people. Some people might want to try to have their own apartment or stay in their own family home. And we're going to talk a tiny bit more about housing models, but not get into too much detail about that. Is employment and earning money important to your family and your child? And what is that going to look like? We prioritize physical and mental health and well-being. That was a cornerstone of our programming. Communication, not only an individual's ability to communicate, but communication with outside agencies and other people in your programs. What does the community life look like for your family member? How engaged do you want them to be in maybe different recreation opportunities or volunteer opportunities, or what sorts of connections are they going to have with their cities and with their suburban counterparts? Of course, we want to look at recreation and interests and hobbies. These make up a big part of life for all of us. And sometimes when the vocational programming can't be as strong, or we can't get exactly that job that we want in our desired area, we can put our emphasis on an avocational interest or a hobby or a volunteer opportunity that might fill that need. Choice and decision making, of course, is very important, and future plans come at the end. And really, this slide is a misnomer because there is no finish line. These plans and decisions are constantly being changed and reevaluated, just like they are for any of us. So every year we take another stab at rearranging our goals, but for all of us, we're making changes as we go out throughout our life. Nothing is different for our young adults. So if you're going to be a starter and you're going to try to begin a program, this is a sequence of events that we thought would be helpful for you. And of course, each one of these could be its own webinar, but we recommend that first we find a good attorney and a good real estate agent. You're going to need somebody who has both commercial and residential expertise. You must have a good attorney if you're going to be working with other families. There have to be agreements about roles and responsibilities and how you're going to participate as your community. There's many different types of ownership models that you might look at when you're looking at housing, and you're going to want to decide on location. So one thing I just put in here, you need to be thinking about, if you're creating housing for your young adult, what are the rules in your township and your municipality for adults who are living either together or side by side or whatever type of a process you're thinking of. Make sure you check what those rules are because they're different in every town. What's important to your family? And then of course you're going to have to think about funding. Is this going to be a waiver funded project, or are you going to be paying privately? You're going to want to think very carefully about the interior design and the layout of a housing program, and then finally their staffing and operations. Just to give you some idea of different housing models that we've considered and that are very popular, I'll go through these briefly. Shared living is an example of shared living is most likely the young adult with the disability owns a house or is renting an apartment and wants to share that space with another person who might be able to provide some caregiving or supportive roles. The supportive housing model comes to us from the mental health and the mental illness world, and typically involves some kind of permanent supportive housing and vouchers and funds in that way. There are support family models, and these are host family or foster family models that can also be funded by the waiver. We see a lot of intentional communities springing up in the United States now. These are amazing communities for people who want them and want to have this type of environment. There tend to be larger communities that might be like a ranch type of a situation, or some kind of a campus-like environment. It's very, very difficult to get these kind of communities passed and through the Medicaid waiver. We'll talk a little bit about that more. But they are out there and they're springing up, and Sweetwater Spectrum was an example of that in Sonoma, California. Then, of course, there are what are people think of as traditional group homes. We ended up creating a group home model, but we think we've done it in an innovative way so that it doesn't look like other quote-unquote group homes, and we don't really like that word because it has so many negative connotations. Similarly, there are supervised apartments where people might rent their own apartment and then receive some intermittent supports in that type of a setting. So, of course, the first thing you're going to have to decide when you're looking at housing programs is where you're going to put this. This was a primary consideration for our family. We knew that we wanted to be in the city. That was what felt comfortable to us. John had become very comfortable living in the city, going to the orthogenic school, and we wanted access to public transportation and all the free, fun stuff that the city could offer. So the location was very, very important to us, but some of you would never live in the city and would think that that was a horrible choice and would prefer more of a suburban model or a rural model. So again, depending on your needs and what your family might be thinking about, this is one of the primary early considerations. I'm going to just quickly go through these waiver slides. I'm assuming that most of us know about the waiver. Medicaid funds can be used to support individuals in community-based settings. People ask me where the term waiver comes from. Well, in Illinois, unfortunately, we still support a lot of institutional care. We're almost at the bottom of the states in terms of the number of institutions that we still have open. But individuals basically waive their right to receive services and supports in an institution, and they select a more community-based setting. So that's where the waiver comes from. And the waiver funds are designed to allow people to live, with family or on their own with supports, or in theoretically small congregate settings. Who gets funding? Many people say, well, my child has autism, but they don't have an intellectual disability. But if you have autism, you have more of a related condition, and if you can benefit from active treatment, you might be eligible for funding through the Department of Human Services and the Division of Developmental Disabilities. There's a lot of hoops and things you have to jump through, and a lot of requirements the DHS has, but eventually, if you have limitations in 3 or more of these life areas, like self-care, language, your ability to learn, your ability to get around, or self-direction in terms of being able to make your life choices and plans, and your capacity for independent living, you may qualify for funding. So I always encourage families to get on the state's waiting list and sign up, be on the PUNS list. There are new deadlines and promises being given to us that individuals will only be waiting up to 5 years before they receive funding. So we hope that that's happening. If you do receive funding and you are pulled off the waiting list, you will complete a personal plan with your case management agency and then decide the services and supports that are needed to implement your personal plan. And I can't stress this strongly enough, because the personal plan that's created by the case management agency is going to drive the amount and the type of services that your family is going to get. So it's very important to get listed what you want on that plan. Agencies have to follow through with those goals, and I recommend a lot of time and energy go into that process. We put a tremendous amount of time and energy into this. I don't know that other agencies can say the same. But this is the time that you might identify the place you want to live and with whom you'd like to live and what type of supports you're looking for, and you're either going to find an adult service provider who can implement this plan and meet your needs, or maybe you're going to go ahead and start your own program. So this is kind of what we did at this juncture. We started with the bricks and mortar aspect of this, and our first residence was at 1212 West Flournoy in Chicago. This property allowed us a tremendous amount of flexibility to be able to really demonstrate the residential concepts that we were very interested in. Our model was a bit of a hybrid in these days. So we had a nonprofit agency working with some private pay clients who moved into our program, and we also worked with a provider who was able to accept waiver funds for residential care. But what's most important to us was that we found a space that offered us the things that are on the following slide. So everybody in our residential program has their own bedroom, and I can't say how strongly I believe in that. We are located very centrally, right in between UIC and Rush University Medical Care, because we knew that we were going to collaborate very closely with the Department of Psychiatry at Rush and the new autism program. We tried to help get started there. And we wanted our staff and the people who would come into our program to be from this young, urban, relevant neighborhood. So we're in a very, very pedestrian-friendly part of town. We're located immediately adjacent to the Blue Line and the 60 bus, so we have great access to public transportation. We felt that being in the city would give us a better leg up on vocational opportunities to work with companies that might be interested in hiring some of our residents. Of course, we're near the city colleges and the universities who are near us. But most importantly, our residential concept combined the idea of communities and residential space under one roof. That was very appealing to me. That has worked out very well for our young 20-year-olds. So for instance, 1212 Flournoy operates as almost like a small hotel and conference center. Everybody has their own private room, and they have large rooms, and they can go to these spaces when they want to have privacy or just have quiet time. But there are many activities and programs that take place on the first floor of this house. And we bring the community into our residential program this way. Otherwise, we fear that our residents would be very, very isolated. And this has been a fantastic concept. It's worked out incredibly well. But I will tell you, as our residents get a little bit older, I'm not 100% sure that it's the right model anymore. So that's kind of to be determined. And I'm learning that what people need in their early 20s may not be so much what they need in their later 20s and their 30s. So again, there's no finish line. We always have to be flexible in our models. So while all this was going on, the provider that I was working with, who was amazing and is a good friend of mine, told us in August of 2014 that we were going to have to get our own license, that they just weren't going to be able to work with us the way we were working because we were doing things in such unusual ways, according to the Department of Human Services. So I did go ahead and I went through the process of becoming a provider. And the company that we created is called A+ Autism Solutions, and that company opened in 2016. We do take SILA funds or waiver funds for residential care. And the way this works is that A+ provides services to families who have waiver funding, and that's all that it does. The individuals that we serve either rent or own their own property. So A+ does not own any real estate. And our residents can access a variety of programs and services from other agencies. So for instance, one of our residents is an artist at Project Onward. And
Hi,
yeah.
Julie. I'm really sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much for all the information. This is a great and very important topic. However, we want to give the participants some time for questions. So
Sure.
if you can wrap up within 5 minutes, it
Yes.
would be great.
Okay, for sure. We'll do
Thank you
that.
so much. Fantastic.
Of course. So we won't go through these slides, but I want you to know they're here and we're happy to send you this information. Becoming a provider is a lengthy and difficult process that involves starting a business and being a Medicaid related company. So there's, like I said, it's many, many, many steps, and you have to really have the capacity to hire and train staff and manage nursing care and follow through with all the reviews and audits that are going to be required of you, as well as managing a payroll, insurance, and workers' compensation. So it's not easy and it's not straightforward, but for us it was the way to go so that we could control exactly what we wanted. Just moving along, aside from our housing program, we knew that we had to create things, of course, that people were going to do during the day. And you should be thinking, too, about the types of social and vocational opportunities that your participants are going to have. We went into the agriculture business and opened a farm that's called Growing Solutions Farm that occupies 1.5 acres in the Illinois Medical District. We love agriculture because it affords a chance to have such a big impact on so many people at one time. And right now we have 30 students from the Chicago Public Schools who are employed every summer at Growing Solutions Farm. We like that it gets the clients outside moving around in the fresh air as well. We started a couple of micro businesses that involve neighborhood dog walking and washing opportunities. That's been really a lot of fun to work with. And we have a big social network program that sponsors meetups, special events, parties, and things on holidays that you might anticipate. And we have a meetup the second Sunday of every month at Pompey Bakery on Taylor Street for pizza, board games, and friendly conversation. So everybody's welcome. We've had a lot of success with employment. These are just some of our employment partners listed on this slide. What I would suggest is that you don't try and go these kinds of things on your own. It's important to collaborate with different agencies and institutions in your area. These are some of our collaborative partners that I feel very, very lucky to work with, and we have wonderful relationships with all of them. There are other examples that you've probably heard of, like a Spirit Tech and Autonomy Works, that are family-created solutions for employment for young adults with disabilities, also started by parents who needed something for their own families. And I would just kind of wrap by saying that, if you're going to create programs, you cannot solve every problem, and you can't be in the formulation stage forever. You have to invest your own time, money, and expertise, and you're going to have to be very persistent and not take no for an answer. For more resources, I would recommend that you see the Madison House Autism Housing Network website, which is listed here. It's a wonderful website for housing. It will take you through some of the decision trees and some of the processes that you're going to go through if you're creating programs in housing. So I thought we'd end today by just a little video of John, who is now doing very well. I'm happy to say he has a job at Trader Joe's. He works at our farm. He's interested in trying to run a half marathon this year because his father ran the marathon the last couple of years. John participates in all the programs that we offer, and when I ask him how his life is, he tells me on a scale of 1 to 10 that it's a 10. So I'm going to take that as a success, but we know that can change in a minute, and we always have to be kind of thinking about what comes next. But I'm going to play a little recording of his voice so that you can hear it from him directly.
I know autism is considered a disability, but I feel like I'm still a very valuable member of society. Things are not always easy, and I know I experience the world differently than most of you, but there are programs, options, and people in Chicago who can help. It will take a lot of work, a lot of patience, and a lot of trial and error, but don't give up. My parents never did, and neither did I, and because of this, I feel encouraged and able to contribute to my family, friends, and community.
So thank you all so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions or join in on any discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing with us your personal experience and the valuable information about autism and the resources available in Chicago. We will take questions now, so everyone feel free to type your questions in the chat area. If we don't get the chance to answer your question, please feel free to contact Julie. Her contact information are on the screen. Okay, so we have a question. How many residents and how much staff are there in your house?
Thank you for that question. We currently support, we have currently 6 young adults right now in 2 locations, and then we have a couple folks who live in their own apartment right in our community. So at 1212 Flournoy, there are 4 residents, and at another townhome just nearby, a couple blocks away, there are 2 young people that share that space. We have on staff at A+ Autism Solutions, I literally have a staff of 22 people. About 5 of them are full-time, and one way that I think our program is so successful is that we have right down from me, the president of the company and a clinician, to our life skills instructors. We have mostly college students and graduate students who are working in our program. And I think that that's a very important concept. I think that the president of every one of these companies should be working in their own residential programs. And I think there's too much division of labor the way that the division is set up right now. I think it's important to be involved at this level.
Okay, great. We have also another question. What is the expense ratio when staff DSP is equal to 1 FTE, 1 year hours is 132K? What is over that? Liability, worker comp, labor, laws, OT, and how much does that come to?
Oh, that's a question I think I'd have to see in writing to answer.
Okay.
I'd be happy.
Yeah. You should be able to see the questions in the chat area if you click on the bubble icon.
Lower right-hand corner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't see them, Rhonda, sorry. But
Okay.
is that one that someone could email to me? I mean, are you looking for, and is it the question, how much does it cost per person per year?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe this person can email you their inquiries. Maybe that is better. Okay. So we have another question. How do you use Social Security funds in your program?
That's a great question. So we have separated out Social Security from our program. We don't collect Social Security funds. Our clients pay rent to a landlord, and we're not involved in collecting Social Security. We're big advocates of trying to separate housing and services. Unfortunately, for providers, the state commingles those funds, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So we don't collect them, and people pay their own rent.
Okay, so another question about who do we contact to come and see your program?
Go ahead and send us an email at the address on the screen, and we'll be happy to try to set up a visit for you.
Okay, great. And then how could we get involved with Urban Autism Solutions as a helper?
That is a great question. Again, if we have interest in folks who want to be part of our programs, please send us an email, and then we'll send you a questionnaire to find out what sort of interests you have and how we can work together.
Okay, wonderful. So I think one last question. Does your vocational program only serve your residents?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Does your vocational program only serve your residents?
Oh, no. So the vocational program at Urban Autism Solutions is really completely separate from the residential program. The vocational program now serves young people who are in the Chicago public high schools on the west side. We have for instance, folks who work at Growing Solutions Farm in the summer, and Urban Autism Solutions has recently just opened a beautiful new transition academy that's a year-round program for Westside High School students. So we're serving up to 70 students at that location, and they're participating in a lot of community-based instruction as well as job observations and internships. They also receive community classes with speech and language pathologists and our social emotional learning team headed up by Susan Cahan from UIC. So the vocational program is really quite separate from the residential program now, although we do take it as a priority that our residents will have employment, and we do whatever we can to maintain that for them.
Wonderful. I think we can take one more question. Is $15 minimum Chicago wage in effect for you guys, and does state compensate you for that?
Currently, the minimum wage is $13 an hour, and I would say I believe the rates were not quite up to that level yet, but we, just kind of make this work. So I think the minimum wage is actually going up to $14 in July, and I know there's a lot of sturm and drama about how that's all going to play out. But the minimum wage in Chicago is $13 an hour.
Great, thank you so much. I think we are ready to finish the webinar. Again, I would like to thank our speaker, Julie Tracy from Urban Autism Solutions, and everyone who attended the webinar today. I also want to remind everyone that our next webinar will be on March 25th, and the topic will be about healthy sexuality, empowering self-advocates on sex. Hope to have you with us then. Take care.
Thank you.